The next session today is about governance. We are building so many automations, and it becomes even more important to have policies in the organizations. We have a new product, Automation Ops, released in 21.4, and we have Paul, product manager, explaining what it is. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Tejas. My name is Paul Boulescu, and today I will be presenting you Automation Ops and scaling automation through Automation Ops. These days, most of our effort is focused towards management and governance at enterprise scale. Orchestrator has improved its offering when it comes to modern folders. Automation Cloud had brought a lot of improvements over access control. And very recently, Automation Ops, along with 21.4, was released, and it focuses on this aspect as well. In the past, scaling was a matter of finding the right people. Usually, they were very specialized developers, finding the right tools, or in some cases, even creating their own custom tools that will help organizations tackle the inherent difficulties that they had back then. And even if this bumpy road wasn't enough, the dilemma was because organizations were sensing, of course, the huge potential of automation. How could they bring more people in? How could they put to better use all the experience their employees were having and all the know-how to build up and to contribute towards this digital transformation and to adopt and to embrace automation? One other aspect was how could they better discover potential automation opportunities. And lastly, but not least, saying that they would achieve all of this, how could they still preserve the high quality and the security of their automations? So basically, scaling was a matter of hiring more people and putting more robots to work. But through the years, things have changed. And starting with Orchestrator, we enhanced the access control and the release management capabilities. And we allowed IT departments to address automations just like they would address any enterprise level software. Automation Hub came into picture, and they gave more insights over what's the pipeline or what's the return on investment. Citizen developers got a chance to contribute to this whole story through Studio X. We managed to leverage AI and ML and put to better use the system data that was already collected by organizations. We managed to perform a handover between robots and users through software like apps or like UiPath Assistant. And what was before a dream to have a robot for every person became tangible. We also made progress towards the complexity of automations. We had attended and unattended. We had hybrid or long-running workflow. So this whole picture changed a lot. And now we can truly think of building a fully automated enterprise through UiPath platform and bring enterprise scale and management capabilities at every step along the way. Of course, giving all of this power to organizations and especially to citizen developers brought in discussion some specific issues and some specific concerns. How do you make sure that the high standards of quality and security are being applied? How can you scaffold and tailor the experience to RPA and citizen developers alike? How can you simplify collaboration? Imagine collaboration between not only projects members or team members, but also between departments or between different countries. Imagine creating an automation in Australia and having it validated in France, for example. And this is how automation ops came into picture. It's a cloud-first, rich web-based application. It's part of Automation Cloud, and it allows through governance to um, make sure that full deployments, large deployments of Studio family products, and as well as UiPath Assistant are used the right way. And these are only some of the reasons why Automation Ops is so great. It's an out-of-the-box deployment. It applies to all existing install base, as long as the versions are compatible, of course. It is deployed as part of UiPath Automation Cloud, as I mentioned. Basically, with UiPath Automation, you can oversee and control without intrusion and use restrictions the experience within these products. You can also deploy it at scale or just tailor to individual needs. And of course, other configurations are available as you will soon see at group level, for example. It matches your development cycle with the first step, controlling what are the available feeds within Studio, for example. What are the allowed activities or the allowed packages? What URLs and what apps you can automate over. You can configure custom policies for your organization, and going towards the second step, you can control the outputs. By putting to use the extremely powerful workflow analyzer feature, you can configure rules to be applied before running or publishing, and therefore restrict or control the publishing or the running of automations if they fail to meet the required criteria by your organization. Lastly, but not least, we offer logging and auditing capabilities. Everything that a robot does is safely stored within Orchestrator. You get traceability, who did what, you can see what errors have been thrown, you can see what application were used along the way and what resources were consumed. And let's see how it looks. Automation Ops is part of the Automation Cloud, and it's located under the admin area. And when you open Automation Ops, you will notice that it is split across 3 different sections. You have policies, where you can define and manage your organization's policies. You have the deployment area, where you can decide who gets which policy, basically. You get to have to decide between 3 levels of deployment, tenant, groups, and individual users, and you have settings for very high-level service configurations. But looking a bit at the policies section, this is where you have a list of all your organization policies. And by looking at their titles, for example, you can tell that they serve different purposes. They have different target audiences, they have different levels of governance restriction, and they're connected to an end product. They are purposed to be used by a single type of end product: Studio, Studio X, Studio Pro, or Assistant. Let's take a very common scenario. You want to restrict the automation over a specific website or a specific service. Why would you do that? Maybe because that website's terms and conditions prohibit you from doing so, or because it's an internal tool and you want to throttle somehow the automation over it for performance reasons. This is very straightforward, and you could choose between creating a new product policy by clicking the Add Product Policy button and giving that policy a name and selecting an end product, probably a Studio Family product, because you want to govern the design time. But we won't do that because we already have a policy that does just that. It prevents automation over UiPath.com, just for the sake of this example. It is named restrictive policy. And if you edit this policy, in the edit view mode, you will notice a couple of things. You will notice that this restrictive policy is purposed to be used by Studio Pro. That's the target product. It has a name, it has a description, and it has a huge list of settings. Not as huge as we would like it to be. We're still adding towards it, but to building it, but it covers a lot of functionality that is currently in Studio. It covers design and general tabs of the backstage. It covers feature toggles. From here, you can control things we name shell functionalities like send feedback or hide getting started screen. You can control the allowed feeds when the user tries to develop a process. For example, you can restrict the adding or removing of a feed or enabling or disable, and you can leave a list of enforced feeds to that specific user. And you have Workflow Analyzer. That's the powerful feature I've mentioned earlier, where you have a list of all the rules you can configure in order to achieve your governance objectives and goals. Last on the list is the location, where you can control a default location where projects are being created. But because our task here is to restrict, to prevent the automation over UiPath.com, in order to achieve that, we will put to use a workflow analyzer rule. And before we go to configure that rule, we should make sure that workflow analyzer is applied whenever the user tries to publish or the user tries to run the process. And for that, we have to set both of the settings to yes. And we also have to make sure that the user doesn't get a chance to override the governance policy settings. So we will disable these two settings, allow user to override for both of the cases, publish and run. Once we do that, we can safely go to Workflow Analyzer and configure the rule, because we're confident that it will be applied whenever the user tries to run or publish. And there is one last thing we have to do before we configure the rule. That is to prevent user from altering the configuration of the rules. So we will set to false the allow user to override. And that means that all the rules will come with the exact settings we defined here in the policy. After that, we can search the rule we will use for website restriction, and that is UX SEC 010. And from this rule, you can do more things. You can also enforce the automation or restrict automation over different applications, not only websites. And if we start to edit this rule, we will notice that is enabled. We've changed the default action to error because we want to prevent the publish or the run in case the process doesn't meet the expectations when it comes to automation of our website. And we have to make one final change. Under the parameters area, we have to change the restricted URLs and add UiPath as an restricted URL. And this is already added here when we initially created the policy. All is set, and what we have to do now will be to save the rule in its current setting, and afterwards save the entire policy. And by that, we'll be sure that whenever the user tries to run or publish, it will be checked whether the UiPath.com website is being automated. And if yes, it will throw an error. One last step before the user can receive the newly created policy or the newly updated policy would be to assign it to that user. And we have three levels of deployment. We can edit at tenant level, and here we have a list of all the tenants created in our organization. We also have a group level deployment, which will override the tenant settings. And we have a list of groups here that were added and groups that we've defined in our user and group section of Automation Cloud. And we also have a list of users for special cases when a user don't need any of the, or shouldn't receive any of the policies we assigned at group level or at tenant level, and they might receive a special policy or no policy at all, as we will soon see. But for the purpose of this demo, I will only show you, for now, a deployment at tenant level. And because I'm connected to Business Org tenant, I clicked on it, and I'm looking for my current license, and my current license is an RPA Developer Pro license. And because I found it, I can expand it and look for the current product I'm using. And my current product is a Studio Pro profile. And once I identify it in the list, I can go on and make sure that the assigned product policy is the right one. And it is restrictive policy, the one I've edited earlier and the one I'm happy with. So this deployment configuration is good to go. I can leave it like this because it's already been saved, and I can jump to Studio. And when I jump to Studio, I will see that this Studio instance is being governed. I can tell that by looking at the company policy value under help, and I see the restrictive policy I've previously showed you. And my expectation is now that since this policy is being applied, the experience will be altered. The user won't be able to do certain things. And one of the things I expect the user from not being able to do would be those configurations I added in the design tab under backstage settings. And if we look at enhanced analyzer before publish and enforce analyzer before run, we will notice that they're both set to yes. And one more thing, they govern via company policy, and I can't change their state because the configuration, the policy file stated that I can't override them as a user. So all I have to do now is to create a new process that will try to automate a website. And I will try to automate, of course, a restricted website to see how this happens. And once the process is created, I will go to main XAML file and try to extract some information from UiPath.com. I will use for this purpose table extraction widget. I will navigate to a newsroom section of UiPath.com. And with the table extraction widget, I will collect the titles of the latest news. Let's say the latest 10 news that were posted here. And I'm happy with the selection. I can save and return to Studio. And once I do that, I will notice that the sequence has already been built. I have here all the activities that I need in order to open the URL on uipath.com and extract the table data. And let's see how workflow analyzer settings have been affected by the governance policy. If we open project settings and go to workflow analyzer, we will see that the full functionality may be restricted by company policy. This is expected. This is because the policy is here and altering the experience. And I can see that I'm not allowed to change in any way the workflow analyzer rules settings because I disabled this option when I created the policy. I can't disable them and I can't change their default action. And if I navigate to UX SEC 010, the rule I've used to restrict the automation over UiPath.com, and I check the prohibited URLs parameter, I will see here that I have UiPath.com listed. So if this works, and it will, when I will try to run or publish the process, because workflow analyzer is being enforced and because I'm trying to automate a restricted website, I should get an error. And I click publish, and of course, an error has been thrown. The project has workflow analyzer errors and cannot be published. Check global publishing settings allowed by your team. This is thanks to the governance policy that is being applied, and there's nothing I can do about it. Going back to UiPath automation, there are a couple more things I would like to show you. Let's say that you don't want to expose an entire department or an entire project team to the same policy that is being applied to the tenant level for different reasons. Maybe the project they're working on has different particularities, or maybe they have different seniority levels. Regardless of the reason, you can go to groups and you can select individual groups and you can apply different policies to these groups. Applying policies to these groups will override the settings placed on the superior level, the tenant level. Let's take IT group, for example. It's currently inheriting the policy set at tenant level, but I don't want that. I will apply IT policy to this group. I've created earlier this one. And let's take one more example. I will go to another group, which is the Astra group. Imagine this is a group with developers working on a special project, and they have special governance requirements because of that. And I will also change the assigned policy for this group. I will assign a policy I've created earlier, which is named also Astra as the group, and I save it. And now I have all these group level policies, and I have the tenant level policy. Let's see how a user that is member of both of the groups will experience this policy inheritance. And if we navigate to the user and we check the inheritance, we'll notice that Astra from the group level is being applied, and IT policy from the IT group level is being applied. So it overrides the tenant policy, but you may ask yourself, how we decided the order in which the policies have been applied, since both of them were at a group level. In order to achieve that, we look at the priority. When creating a new policy or when editing an existing one, you can change the priority level. The lower the numeric value, it means the higher the priority is. And Astra has a 3 numeric value for priority, which is lower than 4, which IT policy has. So that is why whenever there is a conflict between group level policy assignations, the one with the lower numeric value, meaning the higher priority, will be applied. And there's one more thing you can do. Assume that some users need entirely different governance policies, or maybe they don't need any policy at all because they're testing new features, for example. You can do that. You can go to user level and you can override any of the group level or tenant level policies that have been applied, or assign a no policy configuration for that specific user. And if we check one more, the view policy inheritance, we will see that no policy is being applied, and it overrides any of the group level and tenant level policy that were previously configured for and exposed to this user. We don't want to spoil a surprise for upcoming features and functionalities, but what we can share with you is that we're looking forward to having feeds management capabilities and extend the integration with more UiPath products, for example, Automation Hub or Insights. Automation Ops is live. Go on and check it. It's on Automation Cloud under the admin area. Just play with it and let us know what you think about it. And feedback is always welcome through forum. Thank you very much. Tejus, back to you.
Thanks, Paul. The immediate question that everybody had is that when do we have automation ops on-prem?
We're actively working towards bringing automation ops on premise. It will be it is targeted for 21.10, and it will also come along with platform capabilities.
Tell us about the compatibility. Does automation ops work with older version of studios?
Of course, I'm glad you're asking. We are compatible starting with 20.10.3 for Studio, and with 21 release with Assistant, and we'll preserve any legacy compatibility in automation ops, giving the users the possibility to configure and to decide which is the current deployment version they have on premise. And that's how we'll make sure that governance works smoothly, when regardless if they fall behind a bit with upgrading to the latest one.
Sure. Now, with policies at group level, tenant level, and at individual level, what would you recommend as the best practice?
I think we can give some suggestions, but usually this will be organization driven, and they will have to find whatever works best for their specific patterns and practices.
Agree with you on that, Paul. One size solution which fits all is impossible for policies. Thank you for that wonderful session and clarifying these doubts. Now we are all excited to look at the winners of HyperHack solutions. See you there.